In the days between Christmas and New Year, I headed down to the coast for a hike. It was amazing. Some big storms had blown through, so there was massive swell and these dramatic skies. The fog cast a kind of silvery light over everything, and the spray blasted up off the ocean. It was dramatic and wonderful, and it made for the most exhilarating hike. Hi, I'm Claire. I'm an artist and designer, and today I'm taking you on a hike with me to the California coast. I'm going to do some drawing while I'm there, and I'm going to walk you through my process of abstraction. My work is very much informed by the lived experiences of being in wild places. I just love the tracks and traces that people leave behind, and I love the stories they tell. I'm then going to bring you back to the studio where I'll finish the sketches that I started and extend them further using some of the documentation that I captured while I was there. And finally, I'll walk you through the finished work. I'm excited to get out. I've got some drawing supplies. I've got some new lenses to try on my camera, to experiment with. Let's get out there into it.
And while we're driving, a gentle reminder to like and subscribe. Many thanks.
I love going to the beach in winter. The sound of the waves, the scent of the salt on the air, and the wild, wild weather. The combination is just exhilarating, and it takes everything that you've been holding tightly inside and just shakes it loose. It's just the most wonderful, freeing feeling. I hiked up over the headlands where you experience the full drama of this place, looking out across the dramatic oceans with the plunging cliffs below you. As I walk, I take photos of anything that captures my eye, colours, textures, shapes, as well as the traces and marks that people have left behind in the form of footprints and mountain bike treads. Afterwards, I headed down and walked along the harbour beach, which is sheltered and quiet and peaceful. So I'm back in the studio and I'm ready to start experimenting and doing some more work into some of these marks and some of these textures and patterns and shapes and colours that I found this morning. So I'm going to continue working in my Concertina Sketchbook and just see where it develops from there. Partly leaning into the marks that I saw and partly just working intuitively. So working from the photos, working from my memories, while they're still kind of fresh. I go back through my photos and I'm looking for anything that captures my eye that I'm going to take into my next spread. I think it's really interesting because they really don't behave like watercolor. It's interesting to play with them and see how they behave differently to watercolor. I might go back over this with a little bit of watercolor. So I'm on day 3 in the studio, working on the Concertina Sketchbook that I started the other day. Really pleased with the way it's come together, but there's just the last spread that I want to just do a little bit more work on because it's just not quite feeling fully resolved. There's some areas I'd like to take a little further with this, some explorations. Up in the studio today, I'll be finishing up the Concertina Sketchbook and then I'll show you a walkthrough of it, and then finally I will be working on the bigger pieces, which I will make a video about. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a walkthrough of my Concertina Sketchbook. Some of this was done on plein air, on location, and then the rest of the spreads were done after I got home, back in the studio over a period of days. Okay, let's walk through. So this first spread is the spread that I did actually on site, inspired by the rocks and the trees and the wild, wild stormy waves that there were down at the beach that day, and the amazing fog and the kind of silvery light. The last thing I did was to actually just start to introduce a little touch
of pale green in here because, or the lime green in here, because I do use that quite extensively. And one of the reasons I introduced green was, you know, we've had a good slew of winter rain here in California, and everything starts to turn from golden to bright green with the fresh growth that you get. This second spread, I really was looking and being influenced by, I did a lot of documentation of footprints because it was muddy. So there were a lot of very interesting impressions in the ground, and to my mind, for me, that represents the way that we are interacting with our environment.
As I work, I'm almost kind of decomposing the source material. My process of abstraction is very much subtractive, and I'm looking for shapes and textures and traces, not to depict the actual thing that I see. So I'm capturing an impression rather than a direct image.
So these kind of rhythmic marks are kind of really picking up on the tread from a particular tread from Sneaker, and then it was around a kind of impression in the ground. I tend to work on these 2 panel spreads, and then so I will work like this, and then I'll actually think about how they connect together so that you have a sense of movement through the whole piece. But also the orange was very much a response to that kind of bright silvery light that I was seeing up behind the headlands shining on the water, and trying to express the intensity of that through the use of the contrast of the orange with the black. So then next I started picking up on some of the other impressions that I was seeing. So these were inspired by some of the worm trails that I saw, and then of course more sneaker marks. These are like these marks here, but I've just reduced them in size. You have again a sense of continuity. You have the orange continuing, you have some of the kind of black forms continuing, and that kind of meandering line, which is quite a feature of my work, continuing. This particular one was really inspired by the cracks in the roadway. I probably pushed them a little darker, but I quite like the drama of this spread and of the kind of rhythmic lines, and then the interplay of the green and the orange. And then if I open this spread out, you can see again how this line kind of continues into the next spread and gets picked up. And then you have that sense of movement. And then the final spread, which was trickier, this was very much inspired by the puddles that I was seeing and the footprints around the puddles. The puddles were kind of this pale color with this kind of darker soaking. And then this last spread was really looking in detail at a specific boot print that I really liked. And then I had it just as a line with the dots for a long time, but I really didn't like how, I don't know, regimented that looked. And so I came back in this morning and just broke it up and added just a little bit more of this darker line. And I'm actually liking this now. It kind of has a nice sense of, it's almost yin and yang. So you almost have the dark, and then you have these inversions moving through, and then this is a kind of nice end point where this kind of goes off the end, kind of into infinity. That's the whole thing.
So my process of abstraction is subtractive. It's a taking away, like an incomplete imprint. So I'm trying to make works about the lived body experience of being in the wild, and how the traces and the gestures that are in those spaces speak to the trajectory of bodies that have moved through them. Not just human bodies of other beings as well. And it's a good reminder that we are one being among many in these places.